Hi everybody! In this video I wanted to share with you how you can create an embroidery pattern from a photo with tracing paper, and you'll just need a pencil or a pen in order to create your design. You can do this digitally as well, but I figured I would share the more analog version of this because not everybody has a drawing tablet or iPad. So this is something that's super budget friendly, and it's also a very effective way to create a design. So I found this design on unsplash.com. It's a great option for looking for free stock photos that are generally good for free use. You have to make sure you look at the licensing, but generally you can just use these for referencing and it's totally fine to use. So I have a sheet of tracing paper here, and I also have a micron, but if you're not quite sure how you want to reference the image, I would highly suggest just using a pencil of some sort. But you can just lay it over the image and then we will start tracing. So the main thing that I like to capture when I make embroidery designs is I like to keep the outlines and the image relatively simple. So generally I'll start by capturing just the general shape and outline of everything in the photo. I don't think I'm going to include the icing in this cup. I think I'm just going to do the stacked cups and the hands holding the cups. So I'll just kind of omit that as I'm drawing. But I will just start by outlining everything, and then we'll kind of get into more of some of the other considerations you can take into account. So I've outlined everything and I'm happy with the general shape of everything. I might add a little bit of a line right here and just correct that a little bit so the cup looks a little bit more defined. But I also want to incorporate a little bit of the flowers on the cup. So I do like to kind of think about what stitches I want to use while I'm doing this, because sometimes depending on what stitches you use, you'll mark things out differently. So if you are just gonna do some simple stitches, like say some outline stitches or some satin stitches, I like to just generally mark the shapes and lines out. If you wanted to do something more detailed, I would say you'd want to mark out more of the shading in some of these areas. But this design is so small that I am going to keep these stitches really simple if I were to stitch this. So I'm just generally going to outline some of the little shapes, and I might just like kind of draw in a few leaves here and there. And I'm also going to do the same for down here. I'm just going to generally mark out some of the shapes. And for something this small, I'd probably stick with like the satin stitch or maybe a woven wheel for some of these like circular ones. So I think that's pretty good for marking out that. I might give that a little stem right there. And then you also want to think about how you'd want to fill in maybe the hands and the arms. To keep this design pretty simple, I would suggest just doing something like outlining the arms and maybe filling in the nails with a color. And that would be a simple way to stitch this to where you don't really have to mark out any more of anything inside of this. But if you wanted to fill this in and shade in the arms, I would say you'd probably want to mark out some of the shadows in some of the hands and in the arm here. So you could mark out this little area right here, and that would have a shadow. And there's a little bit of like shadow around the thumb here and like right here in the hand. So you could mark out stuff like that too in the drawing if you were doing something like thread painting. At this point, I like to take a look at the design I have without the reference photo underneath of it, and just kind of see if it's a design that I feel like I'd be able to follow relatively easily. And I would be pretty happy with this design. I could definitely refine some of the petals more and maybe add in a little bit more designs on the teacup maybe. I might add in a few more flowers over on this side since I'm not going to be like shading everything in. For the most part, I feel like this design is relatively straightforward. I feel like when you add too much to a design, it can be a little bit easier to get lost and for it to be really overwhelming and confusing. So I do like to start simpler rather than more complicated. So at this point, this would be something that you could transfer over to a piece of fabric. I'll link a video tutorial below if you're interested in learning how to transfer a design onto the fabric. If you're ever interested in more of an elaborate tutorial on some design principles and creating thread painting patterns and planning them out, I do have a bunch of exclusive tutorials on my Patreon that I'll leave a link to below if you'd like to check that out as well. Otherwise, I'll see you in the next video. Bye.